Well, it's funny. I guess the first thing to note is to be dissociated means to be unable to associate, right? It means the process of association is so difficult because you're just trying to cling to all these things and they can't organize or stick to anything, which is why it's melancholic. You can't identify the object of your loss. So to ask me to associate on dissociation when I am dissociated seems almost impossible.
Right. Although I think association is a practice that even people who are dissociated in a subjective sense can still perform.
Yeah. And I suppose the connection with hypochondria and dissociation for me is hypochondria makes me dissociated insofar as it makes me feel like I'm not really living life. Because the feeling of dissociation is essentially that of like feeling like I'm not really there all the time. That I'm doing these things, I'm doing all these things. I'm working all the time, right? But like when I reflect on it, I don't feel like I'm ever actually there. That's dissociation for me, and that's like the dissociation of, as we were talking about, like doing well but not feeling. I think the lived life of hypochondria makes me feel like I'm not really living. So much of my daily interactions with everyday things is in this sphere of worry as opposed to experience. Right, so like the act of cooking is just plagued with like Google expiration date, like smell test, all these things, because I'm always terribly afraid of getting food poisoning.
So you're not very present to your activity, and you also don't trust the presence that's there.
Yeah, it's a lack of trust to the outside. It's the lack of trust to the act of assimilation, which is warranted with, I think, definitely the past history of colonialism, right? Like the Asian subject in Canada has all the reasons to like mistrust the outside contagion, right? Like
based on a grander historical arc.
I can like remember in 10th grade or 9th grade, like we learned about sort of the Chinese Canadians who came here to like work on the railroads and stuff. And my teacher told me about how they were seen as so subhuman. They just like tied dynamite to them and like told them to just go into the mines to like mass, like to open them up. So like they were literally just kamikazes. Like the Asian body was such a disposable thing. That is just used as an explosive, because like the Asian body could just run into the mines and explode and then produce capital. On the one hand, like that's really messed up, and I think it created this initial sort of dissociation in me.
So there's a way in which this information came to you about Chinese bodies being used for dynamite.
Yeah.
And that penetrated you in a way that shook the core of your relationship to your own body. You took in this information from outside to inside.
Yeah.
You internalized it, and that internalization caused like a forced dissociation, a fissure.
The thing about hypochondria and like getting sick is like you're gonna get better.
Yeah.
But with like this knowledge is just the thought was infectious and it doesn't get better.
Yeah, and there's a way in which that triggered a certain development of defense mechanisms for you. It sounds like there's like a lineage of how you came to be hypochondriac, because that's a defense mechanism against more things coming from the outside and shaking you to your foundation, like this knowledge did.